Thank you. Again, welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee for July. Can we have apologies for absence, please?
I've received apologies from Councillor Barnard.
Thank you.
And sorry, Councillor Mackenzie Boyle as well.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. That's only two missing. So the minutes of the last meeting. I think there's a correction to them. The minutes that we should I should give you a heads up about. At the meeting of the Planning Committee held on the 13th of June 2024, a question was asked in respect of item 7.1, the Brackens. The question related to the table included in the paragraph 4.5 of the report, which analysed the proposal against the requirements of Class AA of the General Permitted Development Order, and asked if the proposal complied with Clause A in relation to the height of the building. In response, the case officer made a correction to the report, indicating that this clause no longer applied. This was not correct. So Clause A remains in force and prevents permitted development rights from applying if the existing building is less than 3 stories in height. The Brackens is 3 stories in height, and therefore the development proposed was not excluded from being permitted development as a result of this clause. Accordingly, the report as written was correct, and the assessment that the proposed development comprises permitted development remains valid. The advice given in this instance did not impact upon or prejudice the committee's consideration of those issues that could be considered under the prior approval application, and accordingly the decision has been issued. Do you have any questions or comments about that? Shall I move acceptance of that report? Thank you. So, are you happy that these minutes are a correct record if I move that they are? Yeah. Oh, didn't have a second. I'm sure you would second. Oh, yes. Thank you. Right. So we have, as I say, only one item on the report. Oh, declarations of interest. I'm sorry. Do we have any declarations of interest for this one item that we have on the report? No. No. Thank you. Do we have any urgent items of business?
No, non-notified, Chair.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. As members will be aware, application 23-00838 was due to be heard by the committee today. That was the one in relation to the community centre opening hours. The primary concerns of this application were in relation to the impact of noise on nearby residents. The officer's recommendation, as published in the committee report, was for approval of this application, and the environmental health officer raised no objections. Subsequent to a review of the committee report, the documentation submitted by the applicant and the committee site visits on Saturday, I believe some other members raised concerns that a proper noise assessment had not been completed and that the mitigations outlined in the applicant's noise management plan did not appear to be sufficient. This application was promptly withdrawn from the committee agenda thereafter. I presume we're requesting further details from the applicant. This is the second application in the last 12 months to be withdrawn from a planning committee agenda at the last minute after members have raised concerns in relation to the assessment of noise impact. Earlier this year, we also lost an appeal in relation to application 22-00732, which had initially been refused by the council on grounds of noise impact. I firmly believe that the appeal ruling in that case was flawed and that Bracknell Forest Council's original decision in that case was in fact correct. and we should have won that appeal, but unfortunately we failed to adequately defend our case for the original decision during the appeal. I'm concerned that there's an emerging pattern here. I'm not blaming our environmental health officers. I think they have a demanding job which requires them to cover quite a broad range of highly specialised technical areas, but they're clearly not receiving the level of specialist support they require to manage these quite complicated cases. Our policies on noise are also currently woefully inadequate, and a significant opportunity to address this was missed in our recently published local plan. I am well on the record of having supported the adoption of the local plan earlier this year, as we needed to address the issue with the 5-year housing land supply. But I did so with frustrations which were discussed at length with the executive member prior to that item coming to council. On multiple occasions, I've requested that we urgently look into an SPD or similar to introduce robust policies on noise, which give our officers a more solid basis from which they can protect residents from noise arising from new development. Unfortunately, I see no evidence of actual tangible progress on this matter. And I acknowledge the role of this committee is not to is to determine applications, not to set policy. However, I think the members in this room are clearly at the coalface, and we're much more exposed to insufficiencies in our planning policies where they exist than many other members in the council. I would therefore like to move that this committee request the attendance of the executive member at a future meeting to report on developments to planning policy and answer our questions on this matter. I would also add, I think probably not the August meeting, as members may be away for that one due to the summer holidays, but hopefully perhaps at the September meeting we could make that request. I believe Councillor Zahuruddin will second that motion.
Yeah, happy to second
Thank
that.
you. Right. Would you like to answer? Or
Well, through you,
comment?
Chair,
Yeah.
I'd perhaps like to defer to the legal officer who's online in terms of the most appropriate way of addressing this. I understand Councillor Smith's the point that he's raising, but I'm not familiar with the standing orders for this committee in terms of whether that would be an appropriate way to go forward or not. So perhaps we could ask Jackie, I think you're online. Please, could you comment?
Yes, I'm here. I'm not sure that I can be of a great deal of assistance. I think it's probably the committee clerk in terms of the rules of the committee itself. I'm not aware of whether notice needs to be given of a motion such as this. I presume that no notice had been previously given.
No, we've had no notice. I could have done with a discussion about this before the meeting, to be honest with you. I wonder if it's something we should take away and discuss.
If you want to discuss it now, we could adjourn quickly, I can check what the Constitution says on this matter.
That would be helpful.
If that's
please.
okay.
Thank you. We're adjourning for a little while.
I am Kylie Cousins, the case officer for this case. This application relates to a detached property in Mitchell Dever Way on the corner of Popham Close. The proposal is for the replacement of the existing 2-metre high wooden fence following the removal of the existing conifer hedge to the side of the property which faces onto Popham Close. The fence will be in the same position as the existing, which is at a lower level than the adjoining footpath, and the proposal includes the use of concrete posts and gravel boards with a privet hedge planted between the fence and the back edge of the footpath, with the fence continuing at the back of the parking space to the garage. As the conifer hedge is being removed, planning permission is required as the fence would then be considered to be adjacent to a highway. However, the existing fence could be replaced with a 2-metre high fence if the hedge was not being removed, as the hedge constitutes an intervening feature. The hedge could then be removed at a later date without the need for planning permission. This is considered to be a fallback position which needs to be taken into account. The application is being considered by the Planning Committee as more than 5 objections have been received and members visited the site last Saturday. I would like to draw members' attention to the supplementary report which contains further representations received since the report was written. The site is located within the settlement boundary and as such, the principle of the development is considered to be acceptable. Due to the nature of the development, it would not result in any adverse impact on the living conditions of the neighbouring occupiers. The application has been amended during the course of the application, as originally a brick wall with fence panel inserts was proposed closer to the highway, and the boundary treatment has now been revised to allow for a 0.7 metre wide landscaping strip. Whilst it is acknowledged that part of the new fence will be visible whilst the proposed landscaping establishes, consideration must be given to the permitted development fallback position and also the fact that the hedge could be removed without the need for planning permission, exposing the existing fence. In light of this revised scheme, it's now considered acceptable in terms of highway safety and its impact on character of the area, with the added benefit of the proposed landscaping being secured by condition. These are photos showing other boundary treatment in the area. Finally, the recommendation is for approval, subject to the conditions and informatives contained on page 60 to 61 of the agenda. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee for the officer? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I've got a few on this one. I will start with the officer just mentioned in her presentation and I think also in the committee report that the fence will be visible whilst the new hedge establishes. Can I just clarify, is that the case that ultimately the new hedge would conceal the fence, or is it the case that actually the fence would remain visible long term, as my understanding is that it's a low privet hedge and would be maintained as such?
Thank you for your question. The proposed planting size is between 40 and 60 centimetres, with a density of 3 to 4 plants per metre, with the privet hedge being maintained at approximately 1.2 metres.
So it will be lower than the
Yes,
actual fence.
but the applicant could allow it to grow higher.
Yeah. Yes, that's what's happened with this one, with the current one, I suppose. Other questions? Councillor Smith again.
Okay then. And moving on then, the height of the fence, I understand there's an existing fence in that location. Could we confirm firstly just the height of the new fence relative to the existing fence? And also, could we get clarification on where that's actually measured from? Because I noted specifically from our site visit at the weekend that the land height levels on the two sides of the fence differ by a reasonable amount. It's quite a bit lower in the applicant's garden than it is on the public highway side. So are we measuring from the garden or are we measuring from the highway?
Would the officer like to respond?
Thank you for your question. We're measuring from the garden, which is lower than the highway.
I think that was in the report, to be honest. Councillor Smith again.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure I saw that clearly in the report, but is that clear in terms of conditions, is that shown on the submitted drawings? I just want to ensure that there is clarity in terms of what the applicant can and can't build, where they're measuring from when they do so.
Thank you for your question. The applicant confirmed the height. The height will be 1.8 metres from the roadside due to the level difference. Sorry, 2 metres. But yes, it will be in exactly the same position as the existing fence.
Councillor Smith again.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure that was. I want to establish clearly that the fence is 2 metres. I understand the answer a second ago was that 2 metres is measured from the garden side. I'm just trying to establish where that's documented. Is that clearly shown in the applicant's drawings, or is that covered in any of our planning conditions? Because I think that's quite important, because that's potentially my estimate is about a 300mm difference depending on where you measure it from.
Officer. Yeah.
Madam Chair, maybe if I could answer this question. So the applicant has confirmed that it is the replacement of an existing 2-metre high wooden fence, although the height does vary because of the level changes. And we know that on the garden side, as we can see in the photograph at the moment, that fence is 20 to 30 centimetres lower than the highway. So if we have a 2-metre high fence in that position, then from the highway it would be 1.8 metres in height maximum. Hopefully that will answer your question.
Thank you. Can I ask, will the fence be the same height as the brick gateway that we can see in the photograph there? When it's in place, or is it going to be taller?
Madam Chair, if I can just answer that question, it will be approximately the same height. I have to say we didn't measure the archway on site, but it will be very similar.
Thank you. I think somebody said that sort of doorways in general are 2 metres high, and if the fence is next to it, I guess that's going to be the same, come to think of it. Does that make sense?
I would say it's going to be about the height of that brick pier, but again, these aren't measurements that were taken on site.
No, that's right. Any other questions from anybody else? Councillor Smith again.
I'm sorry, Chair, I appear to be running the show this evening. My next question then is, and as you'll be aware, this is the ward I represent, and I'm aware of a few cases in the area where boundary treatments have been particularly controversial around Forest Park. The history of the Forest Park area and the developer of the Forest Park area has always been very much against hard boundary treatments close to the highway, and there's quite a well-established precedent there that it's either soft boundary treatments or it's stepped back quite considerably. And I think, the officer showed us some images a moment ago of other examples of hard boundary treatments in the area, but they did come up quite quickly. I don't know if we can maybe bring some of them back. My feeling is that they are primarily stepped further back from the public highway than is the case in this case. So, my question is that there is a precedent in Forest Park regards this specifically. I know we've had other issues where we've enforced against residents putting boundary treatments there.
Perhaps you could keep this bit for the debate and we'll
just
look at the pictures.
I'm getting to the question. Apologies, Chair. The key of the question is, could the officers explain to us clearly what is the precedent in Forest Park, because it clearly is different to other areas of the borough. There are specific ways that we seem to be handling boundary treatments there. Are there clear rules as to when is a fence acceptable, when is it not acceptable? How do we make that judgment?
I'm not certain there is a rule. They're all very different. Perhaps we can see the
Madam
photos.
Chair, so each case has to be dealt with on its merits. In this case, we have demonstrated that there is a fallback position which weight has to be attributed to. I know that there have been cases in Forest Park where owners of properties have recited their boundary treatment and encroached onto amenity land. However, this is not the case here. So what I would conclude is that each case has to be dealt with on its merits.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. As a supplementary to, I do appreciate every case needs to be considered on its own merits, but I think when we're talking about arguments, particularly of character, which is what a lot of the objections to this application bring up, you can't consider character in isolation. It's a principle of the context. And do we have any other examples of a fence at only 700 millimetres from the public highway in the near surrounding area?
I would say actually it used to be like that before the hedge grew. It's the same, is it not?
Well, I intend to ask about that in a minute, Chair.
Would you like to comment? Yeah.
Well, I think the photograph that we have before us probably shows the fence closer to the highway. But as Madam Chair said, this was the case before the conifer hedge was allowed to grow to its current height. So in this particular case, the fence itself is not being recited. It's being replaced in the same position.
Thank you. Is this a question?
It is a question, Chair. Sometimes questions need a little bit of contextual explanation.
I appreciate that. But,
it is a question.
Careful.
Sorry, just to gather my thoughts on that. So yes, I acknowledge there is an existing fence there. Can I ask, is that fence original, or at what point do we know that? When did that fence come into existence?
I can't confirm if it was original, but it certainly has been there more than 10 years. And it's certainly lawful.
Yep.
Thank you, Chairman. So coming back to the point of the wider context, I'm aware that there are other instances of fences being erected, in some case having been there for a significant period of time, and then our enforcement officers requiring them to be removed. I'm just trying to establish a fence has been put up behind a hedge. If it was always there, that is a different situation to if the fence had been put up at a later point and concealed by the hedge, and obviously hadn't been an issue because it's concealed by the hedge, but is now about to be revealed. So could the officer speak to that? I'm just trying to clarify. If there hadn't been a hedge there and there hadn't been a fence, and then a new fence was put there, would we have sought enforcement against that, as we have in other instances in the nearby area?
If it required planning permission, then yes. If it was brought to our attention as well.
But was this So I can't think, you know, sorry, I've lost for words now. It is as it is at the moment, and there are, you know, the things that the householder can do that would just replace the fence and then the hedge, and nothing could be done about that. So, where do we go from this? I think that's enough questions, really. Can we debate, please? Would you like to comment?
Sorry, Chair.
Else?
I have further questions. We've not been debating this for a particularly long time. Is there a particular reason why we're closing questions at this stage?
Well, we can say things in debate that you seem to be saying, so you can put your points and then we can discuss them.
Okay, but I do have further questions for the officers, if that's okay.
Right. I'll take 2 more.
Okay, I'm concerned that the Chair is limiting questions, I feel legitimate questions from members. I'm sure members would like to get home, but I feel this, you know, we have a resident in the room who
Okay.
I know has objected on this. We should be going to the effort to discuss this fully,
Right.
and we should ensure that particularly the concerns that have been raised by residents are discussed fully by the committee before we make a decision. Otherwise, we're not
How
in a
many
position
more
to make the
questions
decisions.
do you have?
I do have 2 on my sheet. We'll see what else comes up as the officers ask, but I'm just concerned as to why we're seeing it fit to limit
let's
questions.
get on with it then, shall we? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to the permitted development fallback position, and I think this might be best deferred to the legal advisor, I just wanted to understand the role of the committee is obviously to determine the application, and a critical test for that is whether or not the decision would stand on appeal. I'm just trying to understand, I realise the applicant could do this, we believe, by permitted development at that point, but does that mean that you know, we can't legitimately make a decision otherwise on the basis of our policies, particularly our policies around character of the area and impact on the character of the area?
Assistant Chief of Planning.
Through you, Chair. Yes, the position with the fallback position is that it's a material consideration in the determination of the application. So it doesn't mean that an alternative view can't be taken, but it is required on members to take it into account in the decision-making process as a material consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have another question then?
I do just have one final question then, Chair. Residents may be aware that this may be contrary to existing covenants they have. I'm aware that covenants are not a material planning consideration, but can we just get clarification that any decision we make today does not prejudice those covenants and the ability of residents to pursue those separately should they wish to?
Assistant Chief.
Through you, Chair. Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I apologise for being difficult there, but I do feel it's important we have a full and thorough discussion.
Thank you. Vice Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question now. I just really want to understand the fallback position. Is it correct that the applicant could replace the fence under permitted development without the need to have this planning application approved? They could then remove the hedge without any issues because there aren't any policies or legal reasons why they cannot remove the hedge, and then not replant it, in which case, to me, that would appear to be a worse outcome than having the planning application approved. Is that correct?
That is correct. So in terms of restrictions, planning permission is not required to remove a hedge. Whether there are any other restrictions, then that's not really a planning matter.
Right, thank you.
Any other questions on this one, please? No? Okay, let's move to debate, please. Councillor Virgo.
Thanks, Chair. I first of all apologise, I didn't go to the recce actually at this, but I have been to see it 2 days ago on my own. Look, I can understand residents being upset when things change. I do get that. You know, and I remember something in Wingfield Row where someone put up a fence and I thought, oh my goodness, this is out of keeping. But actually, you know, I saw it the other day and I didn't even think about it. So it just fits in. And I think on this case, to be absolutely honest, I can't see a reason to object to this. I mean, the fence was there originally. The hedge, which they're suggesting, is a small hedge which will soften that. And I'd like to commend the officer to a certain extent because she pursued better fencing and style of fencing. So I have to say, in my opinion, I can't go against officer's recommendations. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else to speak? Councillor Penfold.
I just had some concerns when we were looking at it. So sad as it would be to lose the hedge, there is a considerable chunk of it that is actually dead, and probably it will spread to other things. And so that part at least would have to be replaced. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else to speak? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I know this is just a fence, and it feels like a simple thing, but I also know as the ward representative that there are residents who feel very passionately about this. My primary concern is with regards the impact on the character of the area, and I do believe that there is something specific about the Forest Park area and how we have historically treated boundary treatments in Forest Park. We do have hard boundary treatments, but by and large, where you can find examples of those in Forest Park, they are set back substantially from the public highway. Certainly not within 700 millimetres. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm also aware of instances where, and I appreciate every case is unique and needs to be considered on its own merits, but I do make that point that when we're considering something like the character, you cannot just think about that in isolation. You have to look at the wider area. You have to look at the precedents that are set. And my feeling is that this doesn't really fit with that. And I know that we have quite aggressively enforced against fences in similar positions in other areas of Forest Park. So I do have concerns that we're not being internally consistent as a council in how we approach and treat that, treating some residents one way and other residents another way. I hope that might be looked into a bit more and we can get a bit more clarity about exactly what is and is not acceptable as boundary treatments in the Forest Park area. I do ultimately take the point with regards to the fallback position. I am concerned that we don't seem to know whether this was an original feature or not. It does seem somewhat permitted development by the back door, and I'm not saying this is what the applicant has done, but we don't know that it's not. If there was a hedge that was the original boundary treatment and then a fence has been erected behind it at some point, and now we're in a position where if that hedge hadn't been there, would that fence have been permitted and would there be a fallback position in the first place? We obviously could never have enforced against a fence that we couldn't see. But you know, I from the way other applications for fences have been treated within the nearby area, we have quite aggressively enforced against that. So I'm concerned about that, but I do take the officer's advice that does exist as a fallback position at this point. Ultimately, you know, this is like all planning. This is about change, and change is difficult, and change is not always popular. And I don't think there's any decision here that can fully satisfy all residents. You know, I think we're having to make actually quite a tricky decision. I know it is about something as simple as a fence, but I think it's important to recognise that there's no single decision here that is fully fair to all residents, which is quite difficult. I'm genuinely not sure about this one, if I'm honest. Just for the benefit of members, that there is a blue sheet available should we decide to refuse it. I'm not moving that at this point, but it is available should other members wish to. I would like to request, I've been requested by the residents, and I don't believe there's any reason I can't do this on their behalf, to request for a recorded vote in relation to this. I don't believe there's any conflict in doing that, no, so I would like to move that request, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Councillor Ijaz online who would like to speak.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to concur with Councillor Virgo's understanding, and as he has personally gone there and visited, I don't have that benefit. I only have seen the pictures and read the officer's report, and I am minded that the officer's findings are correct. I understand difficulty Councillor Smith is facing because this is his resident who is unhappy, and he has to ask all these very important and prudent questions. But in the end of the day, it does sit very well at the moment, and I don't see any problems with accepting this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, Councillor Collins, Vice Chair.
Thank you. I can't believe that the fence would not have been there. I think every resident is entitled to privacy in their own rear garden, and therefore I cannot believe that only a newly planted hedge would have been there when the property was built, and therefore I think we should take that into consideration too. The resident of the property has rights as well as the objectors.
Thank you. Councillor Zahoruddin.
Thank you, Chair. I do agree with Councillor Smith's point about character should be consistent. However, considering the fact that the replacement of fence and the hedge, potentially the removal of hedge in the future, could have all been gone through PD route, I believe the applicant has done a right thing by applying for permission. I don't find any really strong hook in our policies that we could hold to reject this proposal or recommendation. Therefore, I find it very difficult not to vote in favor for this. So I'll be voting in favor for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak? I should have put the motion before before we debated, of course. Yeah, perhaps I'll do that now. I propose the motion as a recommendation as outlined on page 60 of the agenda and informed by page 1 of the supplementary report. Yes, Vice Chair.
I second that.
Oh, yeah. God. I had a thought about this, the position of this fence before I go to the vote, my little pennyworth. This house has a garden that is side on to the road, and I think that it would have had a taller fence, certainly to the back garden. So the wooden fence would probably have been there, but it has been softened all the way along and right around the front with a hedge which has probably grown far larger than it ever used to be. And some of it has now been removed so that picture is not quite accurate. So my inclination is also to approve what's been put before us. So, saying that, can I have a vote recorded of those in agreement with the motion?
So that's 8 in favour.
I should have said the names. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
4.
Councillor Collings.
4.
Councillor Eggleston.
4.
Councillor Frewer.
4.
Councillor Penfold.
4.
Councillor Smith.
Abstain.
Councillor Thompson.
4.
Councillor Zahiruddin.
4.
Councillor Virgo.
4.
So that's carried.
Thank you very much. And that's the end of our meeting this evening. Thank you very much for your patience with everything that's happened tonight. See you next month, if not before. Oh, you're flying.